I knew I had crossed some invisible line when Hazel's grandmother handed me a list of things to pick up from the grocery store, and I just went. No hesitation. "No, are you sure you want me to do that?" Just grabbed my keys, said I'd be back in 20, and drove to the superstore on Regent Avenue like I had been running errands for the Calloway family my entire life, which, if I'm being honest, wasn't far from the truth. The list was in Hazel's handwriting, not her grandmother's. I knew because Hazel always wrote her sevens with a little cross through them, something she picked up from her dad, who had picked it up from his mother, who was currently standing in the kitchen of their house in St. Vital and telling me to get the seedless red grapes, not the green ones, because the green ones were sour and Hazel's cousin Tyler had complained about them at Christmas, and nobody needed a repeat of that. I said I understood about the grapes. I did not ask why I knew which cousin Tyler was. That was the thing about being best friends with someone for 7 years. You absorbed their family like osmosis. At some point you stopped being a guest and started being furniture. Nice furniture, hopefully. The kind people liked having around. But furniture. Hazel had called me the week before her grandmother's 80th birthday and said, "I need help," which was how most of our conversations started. Not because Hazel was helpless. She was the least helpless person I had ever met. She just had a habit of treating me like a resource she had already budgeted for. "The party's on Saturday. I'm doing everything myself because my Aunt Rena said she'd help, and then booked a trip to Tofino instead." Of course she did. I need someone to be here who knows where things are and won't eat the food before the guests arrive. I don't do that. You ate 4 of my mom's butter tarts at her retirement party. I was nervous. You were not nervous. You were hungry and there were butter tarts. That was fair. So I said yes, same as I always said yes. And that was how I ended up at the superstore on a Saturday morning, buying seedless red grapes for a woman named Dorothy Calloway, who called me sweetheart and trusted me with a handwritten list. Dot's birthday party was a backyard thing. Hazel's parents had a place on Niagara Road, with a deck that wrapped around the back, a garden that Dorothy had apparently started in 1987 and considered a living legacy, and a garage full of folding tables that needed to be carried out and set up by someone. That someone was me and Hazel's younger brother Robbie, who was 17 and deeply unimpressed by the concept of manual labor. "You know you're not even family, right?" Robbie said, lifting one end of a folding table with approximately 30% of his available effort. "I'm aware. You show up more than family. I find that personally rewarding. That's kind of sad." "Robbie, lift your end." He lifted his end. Hazel came out the back door with a box of tablecloths and looked at the two of us struggling with the table and did not offer to help. "Far side by the apple tree," she said. "And not too close to the garden. Last time someone knocked over the tomatoes and Gran Dot didn't let it go until November." "When was this?" 3 years ago. It's still mentioned at dinners." I looked at Robbie, he looked at me. "She's always like that?" I asked. "You've known her 7 years. I know. I keep thinking it'll change." Robbie almost smiled. He set his end of the table down a little too hard, and I heard it from 15 feet away. Here was the thing about Hazel Calloway, that I had spent 6 of us 7 years trying not to think about too directly. She was exhausting in exactly the way you only tolerated from someone you genuinely could not imagine your life without. She was organized to the point of being bossy, funny in a way that caught you off guard, and stubbornly, completely herself in every situation. She didn't adjust herself for rooms. Rooms adjusted for her. I had met her in our 2nd year at the University of Manitoba. We were both in a political science seminar that met on Thursday afternoons in a building where the heating only half worked, and she had sat down next to me, looked at my notes, and said, "You've been writing the professor's questions, not the answers." I told her I found the questions more interesting. She said, "That's either very smart or very useless." I said, "Probably both." She had looked at me for a second like she was recalibrating something, then turned back to her notebook. That was it. That was the beginning. 2 people being slightly rude to each other in a cold seminar room, and then somehow, without either of us deciding to, becoming the person the other one called first. By noon on Saturday, the backyard was starting to look like something. The folding tables had white cloths on them. Hazel had strung lights along the fence the evening before. The warm white kind, not the colored ones, because Gran Dot had strong opinions about colored lights being for Christmas and Christmas only. There were flowers from the farmer's market on Corridon in mason jars down the center of each table. A banner that said "Happy 80th" was taped between 2 posts with varying success. One end was slightly lower than the other, which Hazel noticed, and I pretended not to notice her noticing. "It's fine," I said. "It's crooked. It has character. It has a left lean, like your grip politically." Hazel pointed at me without looking up from the tape she was adjusting. "Do not say that in front of her. She will love it and it will take 20 minutes to get past." Gran Dot arrived at 1 o'clock, driven by Hazel's parents, and she walked into the backyard and stopped and looked around and put both hands over her mouth. Just for a second. Then she dropped them and said, "Oh, it's beautiful. Who did all this?" Hazel said. "We all did." Gran Dot looked at me. "You helped?" "I carried tables." "He also went to Superstore," Hazel said. Gran Dot nodded, like this was very meaningful. "Good man," she said, and patted my arm twice, and then moved toward the garden to check on her tomatoes. Hazel watched her go. "She likes you more than she likes most of the actual family. I bring her grapes. You bring her the right grapes. It's a gift." Hazel looked at me sideways, and for half a second there was something in her expression I had gotten good at not looking at directly. Then Robbie appeared from the garage asking where the extension cord went, and the moment passed and we both moved. Guests started arriving around 2. Aunts and uncles and cousins and neighbors and 2 women from Gran Dot's book club who had apparently been coming to every family event for 15 years and were considered honorary Callaways at this point. Hazel's mom, Sheila, circulated with a pitcher of iced tea. Her dad, Frank, stood at the gas barbecue in the posture of a man who considered this a sacred responsibility. I had met Frank maybe 40 times. He called me kid, which was his version of warmth. He had asked me once, early on, what I did for work, and when I told him I was a project coordinator at a civil engineering firm downtown, he had nodded and said, "Good, stable." That was the entire evaluation. I had passed. I was coming through the back door with a second tray of buns when Hazel appeared beside me going the other direction and said, without slowing, "Condiments are on the side table, not the main one. Can you move them?" "Already did," I said. She stopped, turned around. "When?" 20 minutes ago. I saw where Robbie put them and moved them." She looked at me like she was adding something up. Then she turned back around and kept walking. "That was us." "That was the whole thing in miniature?" she asked. I had usually already done it. We moved in the same direction without coordinating, and neither of us talked about what that meant. At some point in the mid-afternoon, I found myself standing beside Gran Dot, near the garden, while she explained the difference between 2 varieties of heirloom tomatoes with the intensity of a person presenting to a board of directors. I was genuinely listening, which probably said something about me. Gran Dot noticed. "You're a good listener," she said, settling back. "I like knowing things. Hazel says you remember everything she tells you." I wasn't sure what to do with that information, so I looked at the tomatoes. "She says that?" "She says lots of things about you." Gran Dot's tone was perfectly pleasant and completely terrifying. "Says you're the first person she calls when something goes wrong. We've been friends a long time, 7 years. Yes. That's a long time to be friends." She said the word friends the way someone might say allegedly. I looked at her and she looked back at me with 80 years of patience and 0 intention of blinking first. Then Hazel's cousin Trish came over to take a photo with Dot and the moment dissolved, and I walked back toward the deck, telling myself the conversation had been perfectly normal. It had not been perfectly normal. The party got louder as the afternoon stretched into evening. The lights came on when the sun dropped behind the fence. Frank put out the good maple-smoked cheddar that he claimed was for the adults only, which was a rule enforced with mixed results. Gran Dot opened her cards at the big table with everyone gathered around, and she read each one out loud and said something specific about every person who had signed it, which took 45 minutes and was the best 45 minutes of the whole day. I was refilling the water pitcher in the kitchen when Hazel found me. She came in through the back door, closed it behind her, leaned against the counter, and let out a breath that sounded like she had been holding it for 3 hours. "Okay?" I asked. Gran Dot just cried at her card from Robbie, which means Robbie is currently outside looking at the sky and pretending he didn't also cry. "Did you cry?" "I don't cry at birthday parties." "You cried at the season finale of that baking show. That was different." Paul Hollywood looked genuinely moved. I put the pitcher down and looked at her. She had a piece of her hair escaping from where she'd pinned it back, and she didn't seem to know. There was a small smudge of something, icing maybe, from the cake, near her left wrist. She looked tired in the way people looked when they had put a lot of themselves into something and it had actually worked. "It's a good party," I said. She looked at the window. "Yeah, Gran Dot keeps telling people you organized everything. I had help. She keeps leaving that part out." Hazel smiled, just briefly. "She knows. She just likes telling the version where I did it all. Because she likes me. Everyone likes you, Hazel." She looked back at me then, and something shifted slightly. "That's a very generous reading of a room that also contains my Aunt Rena's ex-husband, who is somehow here despite the divorce." "Wait, is he here?" "Apparently he and Frank still golf together. Nobody thought to mention this to me when I did the seating." "Where did you put him?" "As far from Rena's side of the family as physically possible on a residential deck." I laughed. She smiled again, longer this time, and for a moment we were just standing in the kitchen while the party happened on the other side of the wall, and it felt, the way it sometimes felt, like the quietest version of something I didn't have a name for. Then the back door opened and Gran Dot herself walked in, followed by Hazel's Aunt Carol and a woman I didn't recognize, but who looked at me with the specific curiosity of someone who had been briefed. "There he is," Gran Dot said, like she had been looking for me. She turned to the woman beside her. "This is the one I was telling you about." "Hazel's." She paused, tilting her head. "Person." The woman nodded seriously. "The one with the car trouble last February?" I looked at Hazel. Hazel looked at the ceiling. Gran Dot continued. "Battery died in the Safeway parking lot in -28. She called him first. Not roadside. Not her father." A pause for impact. Him. Aunt Carol made a soft sound of understanding. Hazel uncrossed and recrossed her arms. "Gran, I'm just explaining how we know him. You're explaining a lot of things." Gran Dot gestured at me with a cheerful kind of authority. "He stayed on the phone with her the whole time. Talked her through the boost when the roadside truck finally came because she'd never done one before. And then he drove over anyway, after. Just to make sure she was okay." "In -28, the roads were fine," I said. "You drove 25 minutes in the middle of winter because she'd had a fright," Gran Dot said pleasantly. "Don't minimize it." The woman nodded again. Aunt Carol sipped her iced tea with the calm of someone watching a tennis match. "Gran," Hazel said, more quietly now. "Can we not?" "I'm not saying anything," Gran Dot said, and she genuinely seemed to believe this. "You're saying everything. I'm telling Margaret about how we know him." She indicated the unknown woman, presumably Margaret. "That's just context. It's annotated context." Gran Dot looked at me with her 80-year-old patience. "She talks about you at every Sunday dinner, you know. We've been hearing about you for 7 years. Something happened to the air in the kitchen." Hazel put both hands flat on the counter like she needed something solid. "That is a significant exaggeration, is it? You are doing this on purpose." "I'm 80, Gran Dot said. "I'm doing it because I've waited long enough." Then she took Margaret's arm and walked back out to the deck like she had simply refreshed her drink, and Aunt Carol followed after giving me one last look that I would describe as sympathetically entertained. The kitchen was very quiet. Hazel didn't turn around for a moment. She was still facing the window, hands on the counter, and I could see the set of her shoulders, which I knew well enough to read. Not angry, something closer to cornered. I should go back out, she said, but she didn't move. "Hazel, please don't. I haven't said anything. You're about to. I was just going to say your Gran is terrifying." She let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. She absolutely is. She's been doing that for months, by the way. The comments, the looks. She thinks she's being subtle. She told Margaret about my car. "She told me about your car," Hazel said. "Apparently I mentioned it once and she filed it away." "Do you mention things about me?" Silence. "Hazel." She turned around then, and her face was the color of someone who had been standing too close to a campfire, except we were inside and nowhere near a fire. "I talk to my grandmother twice a week," she said. "She asks about my life. You are part of my life. It's not." She stopped. "It's not a thing. Okay, don't do that." "Do what?" "Say okay like that. Like you're being careful." "I am being careful." She looked at me and I looked at her, and the kitchen was small enough that being careful only got you so far. "She said the car," I said. "What else does she know about?" Hazel pressed her lips together. "The parking situation at my building? I complained about that for a month." She looked slightly to the left of me. "The thing with my boss in March? She started. "You were upset and I told her you were going through something hard at work and she asked follow-up questions for 3 weeks. Gran Dot was following up on my work situation. She prays for you. She has for 2 years. I found out by accident. I didn't know what to do with that. I stood there in the Callaway kitchen with the party humming on the other side of the door, and Gran Dot's good intentions radiating through the walls, and I tried to find the normal version of this conversation. The one where I made a joke and Hazel rolled her eyes, and we both stepped back. But there was her face, still a little red, and her hands still on the counter, and 7 years of phone calls and -28 degrees and a woman named Margaret who apparently already knew more about me than I'd realized. "You prayed for me," I said, indirectly. "She prayed. I didn't instruct her to. But you told her enough that she started." Hazel looked at the floor. "I worry about you sometimes." "That's allowed." "What do you worry about?" "That you don't take care of yourself," she said, not looking up. "That you do everything for everyone else and then act like your own problems are less important. That you drove 25 minutes in -28 because I had a bad night and wouldn't have told me if it was inconvenient. It wasn't inconvenient. That's exactly what I mean." Her voice had gone quiet, not soft. Quiet. There's a difference with Hazel. I let that sit there for a second. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. She looked up. No, she said. It's just, she exhaled. It's a lot to hold, knowing someone shows up like that. Knowing you have a person who just comes when things go wrong. You're my person too, I said. For the record. She looked at me carefully. I know, do you? I think so. Because I don't always think you know, I said. I think you sort of bracket it, like it's a category you don't fully look at. Hazel was quiet for a moment. Then she said very evenly, you're one to talk. And she was right. She was completely right. I had been bracketing it since approximately the 3rd year of our friendship. When I realized I was comparing every person I went on a date with to someone I kept telling myself was just a friend. I had put that realization in a box, labeled the box complicated, and put the box in the back of a closet and pretended it was fine there. Yeah, I said. Yeah, she said. Outside, someone laughed loudly. Robbie said something. Frank's voice carried from the direction of the barbecue. The refrigerator hummed. The kitchen smelled like birthday cake and the cedar candles Sheila put out every summer. I drive 25 minutes in February, I said. Because the idea of you sitting alone in a parking lot in -28 is. I don't have a casual response to that. It's not a favor. It's just what I do. Hazel said nothing. And when I'm not with you, I still think about what I'd tell you, I said. I save things up. Good things that happen, or weird things, or things that made me think of something you said once. I'm already thinking about how I'm going to explain it to you before I've even finished experiencing it. I stopped. I've been doing that for years. Hazel looked at me steadily. Her expression was impossible to read, and I knew her expressions better than most people knew the layout of their own homes. What are you saying? She asked. I think you know what I'm saying. I want you to say it. I exhaled. I got here a long time ago. I just kept calling it something else because calling it what it was felt like standing at the edge of something I couldn't come back from if I was wrong. She was very still. I'm not wrong, I said. I don't think I'm wrong. The quiet in the kitchen stretched. Somewhere outside, Gran Dot laughed at something. It was a full, unself-conscious laugh, the laugh of someone who had reached 80 years old and had nothing left to prove. Hazel's shoulders dropped just slightly, like she had been holding something for a long time and had just decided to set it down. February was bad, she said quietly. I'd had the worst week. And when the car died, you were the number I pressed without thinking. And then you showed up, and I thought this is the problem. This is the exact problem. Because you showing up in a parking lot in the middle of winter felt more like being taken care of than anything else in my life had felt in a long time. I didn't say anything. And I drove home with a working car and I thought, I have to stop doing this. I have to stop letting you be the thing I reach for first. She paused, and then obviously I did not stop. Obviously, she looked at me. I was scared, to be clear, in case that wasn't clear. Of what? You, she said simply. Of needing you more than was safe and then losing you. Losing the whole thing. 7 years of someone who already knows your family and your coffee order, and which grocery trips are too long. You don't risk that unless you're sure. Are you sure? She held my gaze. I've been sure for a while. I just kept deciding it wasn't the right time. It's never the right time. No, she agreed. It's never the right time. It's usually a February parking lot or your grandmother's birthday party. The kitchen of your grandmother's birthday party. The corner of her mouth moved. The kitchen. With the cake smell and the refrigerator noise. Very cinematic, I'll take it. She laughed just once, low and tired and real. Then the laughing faded and we were just standing there, close enough that I was very aware of the distance between us. I didn't rush it. Hazel wasn't someone you rushed. She had her own timing, and if you pushed, she pushed back twice as hard just on principle. But she also didn't step away. So, she said softly. So, I said, now what? Now I stop pretending I can walk into your parents' house and feel this way about you and call it a neutral thing. Her eyes dropped to my mouth for half a second and came back up. That would probably be for the best, she said. The refrigerator hummed. The party went on outside and I leaned forward and she let me, and when I kissed her it was quiet and certain and nothing like the dramatic version I had occasionally imagined when I was lying awake being honest with myself. It was just Hazel. Warm and present and exactly where I already was. She pulled back first. Her eyes were a little wide. Mine probably were too. Gran Dot is going to be so smug about this, she said. She's earned it. She has absolutely earned it. She looked at the door. I can't go back out there looking like this. You look fine. I look like something just happened. Something did just happen. She pressed the back of her hand briefly against one cheek. Then she straightened up. Okay, we go out there. We act normal. My grandmother says something. We ignore it. She's not going to let this go. She is going to hold this over me until she is at least 95. She seems healthy. Might be longer. Hazel pointed at me. Don't enjoy this. I'm enjoying it a normal amount. She almost smiled. Then she grabbed the water pitcher I had completely forgotten about, handed it to me and opened the back door. Gran Dot saw us from across the deck. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Hazel, then at me, then back at Hazel, and smiled the slow, satisfied smile of a woman who had been right for a very long time and was finally getting credit for it. Hazel muttered, "Don't," in her grandmother's direction. Gran Dot lifted her hands innocently. 80 years old, perfectly harmless. Not harmless at all. Robbie walked past me 10 minutes later with a plate of cedar plank salmon from the barbecue. He glanced at his sister, then at me, then at the space between us. "About time," he said, and kept walking. Hazel turned to me. "He's 17, how does he even know? He's been watching this for years apparently. We live in different houses, you talk about me." She opened her mouth, closed it. "Don't start." I was quiet, but I was also smiling, and she knew I was smiling, and that was fine because she was too, just slightly, just enough. 2 months later I was back at the house on Nyakwa Road for Thanksgiving. Same deck, same garden, same string lights, still hanging along the fence because Frank said they looked nice, and Sheila agreed and no one had argued. Gran Dot's tomatoes had made it to harvest and she was planning to give me 2 of them, wrapped in a dish towel, because she said I had supported the season by listening to the full explanation in July. Hazel sat next to me at the long folding table, knee against mine, stealing the last dinner roll because she always stole the last roll, and Gran Dot passed behind us with the gravy boat and said, without pausing, "So lovely to have the whole family here." Hazel didn't say anything. I handed her the butter. She took it without looking up, but her hand rested against mine for just a second, easy and deliberate, before she pulled away. Frank asked me if I wanted to watch the game after dinner. Sheila asked if I was staying for pie. Robbie kicked my chair by accident getting up for more turkey and said sorry in the way. Teenagers said sorry when they weren't that sorry, but also weren't being mean. Gran Dot watched all of this from the end of the table with the expression of someone who had lived 80 years, grown tomatoes for 37 of them, prayed quietly for people her granddaughter loved, and known long before either of us admitted it, exactly how this was going to go. I looked at Hazel, who was stealing my role now, even though I thought I had been watching it, and the only word I had for any of it was the right word. Finally,